Every case that come at me, I'm gonna bring it to you. You officially my employee of the month.
You think I should know about this shit? I mean, you just stepped over me.
You dropped this.
One quiet episode just moved every chess piece on the board, and most people didn't even notice it. Season 3, Episode 7 is not loud, not flashy, and not explosive. But it may be the most dangerous episode so far because power is no longer shown with guns or shouting. It is shown with silence, patience, and waiting for the right moment to strike. Episode 7 feels calm on the surface, but underneath that calm is tension that never goes away. From the very first scene, the episode slows everything down on purpose. Characters are not rushing. Conversations feel careful. Even the camera seems to pause longer than usual. This is not an accident. The show is telling us that something big is coming, and before chaos hits, everyone is making their final choices. This episode is about positioning. It is about who steps forward and who steps back, because stepping back right now may be the smartest move. Tommy is at the center of this quiet storm, but what stands out is not what he does. It is what he does not do. He listens more. He watches people talk themselves into trouble. He lets others believe they are in control. This version of Tommy is different from the man who used to solve problems fast and loud. In Episode 7, he understands that power lasts longer when nobody sees it coming. Every scene he appears in feels like he is collecting information instead of making noise. And that tells us he is planning something much bigger than what we are being shown at the same time. The episode shows how fragile every alliance really is. People are standing together, but the trust is gone. Conversations are filled with pauses and half-truths. Nobody is fully honest, because honesty now feels dangerous. The show uses small moments to make this clear. A look held too long. A sentence left unfinished. A promise that sounds weak instead of strong. These details matter because power has always been about betrayal, and Episode 7 reminds us that betrayal usually starts quietly. This episode also changes the emotional tone of the season. Earlier episodes were about pressure building. Episode 7 is about control. Characters are not reacting anymore, they are choosing. That shift is important. When characters stop reacting and start choosing, it usually means someone else is about to pay the price. The writers slow everything down so the audience can feel the weight of those choices, even if the consequences have not arrived yet. By the end of the episode, nothing has exploded, but everything feels closer to breaking. That is what makes Episode 7 dangerous. It sets the stage without giving answers. It reminds us that in this world, the quiet moments are often the ones that decide who survives and who does not. Episode 7 is not the payoff. It is the warning. In Episode 7, Tommy Egan feels different, and that difference is not accidental. He is not rushing into danger, not raising his voice, and not making threats just to prove a point. Instead, he is watching everything around him with sharp focus. This version of Tommy understands that survival is no longer about being the strongest person in the room. It is about being the smartest one. His silence is not weakness. It is control. Every time Tommy chooses not to speak, someone else reveals more than they should. What makes this episode important for Tommy is how often he lets others talk themselves into corners. When people think Tommy is calm or distracted, they start to believe they have the upper hand. They speak freely. They show fear. They show greed. Tommy takes all of that in without reacting. This is a classic power move, and it feels very close to how Ghost used to operate. Ghost knew that listening was more powerful than speaking, and Episode 7 shows Tommy stepping fully into that mindset. Tommy also avoids making promises in this episode, and that detail matters. In earlier seasons, Tommy often locked himself into decisions too fast. Here, he keeps his options open. He does not confirm loyalty, but he does not deny it either. This creates uncertainty around him, and uncertainty is dangerous for everyone else. When people do not know where Tommy stands, they cannot plan against him. They hesitate, and hesitation creates mistakes. Another key detail is how Tommy positions himself in scenes. He often stands slightly back, not fully inside the action. This visual choice sends a message. He is present, but not exposed. He is involved, but not committed. Power Book 4, Force has always used body language to tell the real story, and Tommy's body language in Episode 7 shows patience and confidence. He does not need to prove himself anymore. He knows who he is, and that scares people more than aggression ever could. Tommy's silence also protects him from being blamed. When plans begin to fall apart later, others will carry the weight of those decisions, not him. Episode 7 quietly sets him up as someone who can walk away clean while chaos hits everyone else. This is important because it hints that Tommy may not be the first one to strike in the next episode. He may let others destroy each other first, then step in when the ground is already broken. By the end of Episode 7, Tommy has not taken a single loud action, but his presence is felt everywhere. People change their tone when he enters a room. Conversations shift. Plans slow down. That is real power. The episode makes it clear that Tommy is no longer playing short games. He is thinking about the end. And anyone who mistakes his silence for hesitation is already losing without knowing it. Episode 7 makes one thing painfully clear. The bond between Diamond and Jenard is no longer repairable. Even when they stand in the same space, they feel miles apart. The episode does not rely on shouting or open threats to show this damage. Instead, it uses quiet tension. Their conversations feel forced. Their words sound careful, almost rehearsed. This is the kind of distance that forms after too many betrayals, when trust has been broken so many times that it cannot be rebuilt. Diamond carries the weight of leadership heavily in this episode. He never wanted to rule through fear or ego, but the world around him keeps pushing him into that role. Every decision he makes now has consequences for people he cares about, and Episode 7 shows how tired that responsibility has made him. His silence is different from Tommy's. Diamond's silence comes from pressure, not strategy. He is constantly calculating how to keep things from falling apart, even as he knows that collapse may already be unavoidable. Jenard, on the other hand, is driven by hunger. Not hunger for money, but hunger for respect. Episode 7 exposes how deeply this need controls him. Every look he gives Diamond feels loaded with old resentment. Every conversation carries the feeling that Jenard believes the throne was stolen from him. What makes Jenard dangerous is that he does not see his desire for respect as selfish. In his mind, he is owed power. That belief blinds him to the damage he causes. And the episode makes it clear that this blindness will lead him into a final deadly mistake. Small details in Episode 7 hint that the end between these brothers is coming soon. They rarely agree without tension. When they do agree, it feels temporary, like a ceasefire instead of peace. The camera often places them on opposite sides of the frame, visually separating them even when they share the same scene. These choices are not random. They signal that the story is moving toward a point where one brother will have to fall for the other to move forward. Diamond's struggle is not just with Jenard, but with the kind of man he is becoming. Episode 7 shows him questioning whether leadership is worth the cost. He wants stability, but the world he lives in only rewards dominance. This inner conflict makes him vulnerable. While he tries to hold things together, others are already planning how to break him down. His loyalty becomes a weakness, and in the Power universe, weakness is always punished. By the end of the episode, it feels less like a rivalry and more like a countdown. Diamond and Jenard are no longer brothers moving in the same direction. They are two men standing on opposite sides of a line that cannot be uncrossed. Episode 7 does not show the explosion, but it makes one thing certain. When the clash finally happens, there will be no winners. Only survivors. Episode 7 shifts power in a way that is easy to miss because it does not come from violence. It comes from information, timing, and patience. And this is where Claudia and Myrea quietly rise. While others are focused on territory and revenge, these two are focused on survival and long-term control. They do not rush. They observe. They adapt. In a world where loud moves get people killed, that approach becomes dangerous in the best way. Claudia's presence in this episode feels more focused than before. She is no longer reacting emotionally to every setback. Instead, she studies the board and chooses her moments carefully. Episode 7 shows her listening more than speaking, much like Tommy, but her silence comes from learning hard lessons. She understands now that being underestimated is an advantage. People no longer see her as the threat she once was, and that blind spot gives her room to rebuild power quietly. What makes Claudia effective in this episode is how she uses other people's expectations against them. She allows others to believe she is limited, cornered, or desperate. In reality, she is measuring risk and waiting for the right opening. The episode hints that she is collecting favors and information instead of muscle. This is a shift from earlier seasons where strength was shown through control of supply and force. Claudia now understands that the real weapon is leverage, and episode 7 is where she starts stacking it. Myrea's position is even more delicate. She exists between worlds, caught between loyalty and survival. Episode 7 places her in situations where every word she says matters. One wrong sentence could destroy her future. What stands out is how careful she has become. She speaks only when needed and listens closely when others talk. This shows growth. She has learned that emotions are dangerous currency in this game, and she can no longer afford to spend them freely. The episode also shows how Myrea uses empathy as a shield. People open up around her because she appears safe. They underestimate how much she absorbs and remembers. This makes her powerful in a way that is invisible. Episode 7 suggests that Myrea may soon be forced to choose a side, but it also hints that her real strength may come from refusing to belong fully to any one camp. That flexibility keeps her alive. Together, Claudia and Myrea represent a different kind of threat. They are not leading armies or demanding respect through fear. They are waiting. Episode 7 quietly hands them influence while others are distracted by ego and old grudges. By the end of the episode, it becomes clear that when the chaos finally arrives, the ones who survive may not be the loudest players, but the ones who planned quietly while everyone else was busy fighting. Episode 7 hides some of its biggest warnings in the background, not in the dialogue. Power has always trusted the audience to notice small visual choices, and this episode leans heavily into that style. The lighting, the framing, and even the way characters enter and exit scenes quietly reveal who is gaining control and who is already being pushed toward the edge. These are not random details. They are signals about the future. One of the most important visual patterns in episode 7 is isolation. Several characters are repeatedly shown alone, even when they are supposed to be surrounded by allies. Empty rooms, wide shots, and long pauses emphasize this loneliness. In the Power universe, isolation often comes right before a major loss. When characters lose their support system, they become easier targets. Episode 7 uses space to show that some people are already on their own, whether they realize it or not. Mirrors and reflections also play a quiet role in this episode. When characters see themselves reflected, it often happens during moments of doubt or decision. This is a classic power symbol. It represents a character facing the truth about who they are becoming. Episode 7 uses this technique to suggest that certain characters are crossing a line they cannot return from. Once that line is crossed, survival becomes uncertain. Another subtle clue appears in how conversations end. Several scenes cut away before agreements are fully confirmed. Handshakes do not happen. Promises are implied but never spoken clearly. In power storytelling, unfinished deals usually mean betrayal is coming. Episode 7 makes sure these moments feel uncomfortable, leaving the audience with a sense that nothing is stable anymore. These broken endings hint that alliances formed now will not last long. The episode also uses background characters in a meaningful way. People who say very little are often placed near major players, listening quietly. This suggests that information is spreading faster than anyone realizes. In the world of force, information is as valuable as money or drugs. Episode 7 hints that secrets shared in confidence are already moving beyond control, setting up future consequences. There are also callbacks to earlier episodes and even the original Power series. Certain lines echo past warnings, and specific locations return at key moments. These callbacks remind us that history matters in this universe. Characters who ignore the lessons of the past usually repeat the same mistakes. Episode 7 quietly asks the audience to remember what happened to people who thought they were untouchable. By the end of the episode, the message becomes clear. Danger is not always loud. Episode 7 uses shadows, silence, and absence to tell its story. The Easter eggs are not there to impress. They are there to warn. Anyone who misses them may also miss who is about to fall when the season reaches its breaking point. Episode 7 ends without a big explosion, and that is exactly the point. This episode is not meant to shock. It is meant to prepare. Every storyline pauses at the edge of chaos, like a deep breath before everything collapses. The writers are clearly setting up Episode 8 as the moment where plans collide and quiet choices finally show their consequences. Episode 7 is the setup, and Episode 8 is where the cost of patience will be paid. One of the biggest signals is how alliances feel unfinished. No group feels fully locked in. Conversations stop short. Agreements feel temporary. This tells us that Episode 8 will not be about forming new partnerships, but about testing the ones that already exist. When pressure hits, loyalty will be exposed. The people who were standing together in Episode 7 may not survive the stress of what comes next. Tommy's position going into Episode 8 is especially important. Episode 7 places him slightly outside the coming chaos. He is involved, but not tied down. This suggests that when violence or betrayal breaks out, Tommy will be able to move freely while others are stuck defending decisions they already made. Episode 8 may show Tommy stepping in only after others have weakened themselves, turning patience into advantage. The tension between Diamond and Jenard also feels close to breaking. Episode 7 shows restraint, but restraint does not last forever. Episode 8 is likely where words turn into action. The groundwork has already been laid. Resentment, jealousy, and broken trust are no longer hidden. When the clash finally comes, it will not feel sudden. It will feel inevitable. Episode 7 makes sure of that. Claudia and Myrea are also positioned for major shifts. Episode 7 gives them information and influence without putting them in direct danger. That usually means they will be forced to act soon. Episode 8 may push them into choices they have been avoiding. When survival is on the line, quiet players often reveal how dangerous they truly are. Their moves may not be loud, but they could change the balance of power overnight. Another key setup is the emotional fatigue seen across multiple characters. Episode 7 shows people tired, cautious, and worn down. This matters because tired characters make mistakes. Episode 8 may exploit this weakness. When fear meets exhaustion, smart plans fall apart. The episode seems designed to break characters at their weakest point, not their strongest. Episode 7 also prepares the audience for loss. The repeated focus on isolation, silence, and unfinished business feels intentional. Someone who feels secure now may not make it to the next episode. Power rarely gives warnings without following through. And Episode 7 feels like a long warning sign. By the time Episode 8 begins, the board will already be set. Episode 7 quietly locks everyone into position. There will be no room left to step back. Whatever choices were made in silence will finally speak loud, and not everyone will survive what they started.